Rich.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. A lot of people texting in their shock and horror at the Tribune editorial board's endorsement of Gary Johnson for President of the United States. Bit of a stunner, but I got to say, that is an improvement over their last two endorsements for Barack Obama, particularly the second time around. So, baby steps. Baby steps.
Gary Johnson?
By the way...
Did they not watch the town hall the other day on MSNBC?
Yeah, he's got time.
When they asked him, can you name one world leader that you admire?
Yeah, he's got time to be introduced to Bibi Netanyahu, I suppose. Hey, here's the thing. One other thing for Trump supporters to consider, right? Based on the surveying we've seen, when Johnson is included, which he will be on the ballot, Hillary's lead shrinks. So It seems like it's marginal, but on balance, Johnson helps Trump, not Hillary. So you might want to...
That's why she was attacking him yesterday. She invited the press, had a little briefing with them on the plane and proceeded to rip on Gary Johnson and laugh out loud with the cackle that only you would appreciate, Dan.
Oh, yeah. It's
at what he said.
Like a songbird. So somebody who's very skilled in this area, very knowledgeable about this area, is Doug Schoen. He's a political analyst for Fox News, columnist at Newsmax, and a longtime pollster, very successful pollster, respected pollster. A lot of Democrats, including Bill Clinton and former Indiana Governor Evan Bayh. But he's not just one of these political hack pollster types. He's also smart. He's magna cum laude from Harvard. He's got a JD from Harvard Law and a doctorate in philosophy from Oxford. He's an educated man, and he's written an interesting book about an important world leader that Gary Johnson may come to familiarize himself with. His name is Vlad Putin, and he's the dictator of Russia. And we're pleased to be joined now by Doug Schoen to discuss in part his book, To Destroy Europe, Divide NATO, and Restore Russian Power and Global Influence, Putin's Master Plan. That's the name of his book, Putin's Master Plan. Doug Schoen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm pleased to be here, and I think Vladimir Putin's first choice in the election would be Donald Trump. He's made that clear. And his second choice would be Gary Johnson. So the one thing I guess I draw a little solace from is it's unlikely that the Tribune's editorial board will get this election right because Putin is a risk and a menace, and Gary Johnson's foreign policy is at the very least isolationist. Well,
and so here's the question about Putin and this relationship. I mean, let's start with Hillary then, since you mentioned Trump. The Russian reset, the President Obama, whispering Medvedev's ear. Give us a sense of where we have gone in the 7.5 years of President Obama versus where we were when he took office as it relates to our relationship with Russia and Russia standing in the world.
I think we've gone all in the wrong direction. The reset didn't work. Syria has been fundamentally altered by our failure to enforce our policies when the Syrians crossed Obama's red line. The security architecture of Europe has been changed because of Putin's taking of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. And there was nary a peep out of Obama other than sanctions, no defensive lethal weapons for the Ukrainians. You got the refugee crisis, which is a result of chaos in the Middle East, destabilizing Europe. You have rogue nations like North Korea and Iran. The Iranian deal certainly hasn't tamped down Iranian state sponsorship of terror. And I hold Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, as I think you do, accountable.
Well, then, with Donald Trump, though, he seems to have this bromance going with Putin. I mean, he had mentioned, too, the breaking up of NATO and the U.S. pulling out of NATO, which would mean, NATO would collapse. How would you describe this relationship or this admiration that they have for one another?
Well, I'm deeply unnerved by it. I mean, that Trump the other night said, well, gee, I don't think Putin is responsible for the hacking when our intelligence sources say he was. The fact that you can somehow, in Trump's mind, negotiate with Putin when it's very clear he only responds to power and interest, not to pretty please. That's why I think vis-a-vis Putin, both Hillary and Trump are lacking, and why I wrote Putin's master plan, because rather than being some sort of unhinged person, I think he's a strategic actor who's had far more success with his hand from a weak perspective than we have.
Yeah, and that's
a much stronger hand.
And that's an argument that chess master and human rights activist Gary Kasparov makes as well. You suggest he's got a master plan to divide Europe and destroy NATO. Does that so give me a sense of what that plan is and what are the next steps? Is the next step incursion into the Baltics, or where does he go?
I mean, that's what I'm worried about. I worry that he will decide that Russian interests are being jeopardized somewhere in Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, and that there will be some sort of green men going in there, and the possibility of Russian troops directly or indirectly supporting it. And as far as I can tell, with the refugee crisis and with sanctions on Russia, old Europe and new Europe are divided, and his master plan's working pretty well.
And the only thing we have is economic sanctions against Putin. But do we have any other tactic to confront his plan?
Well, we're supposed to have a rapid reaction force in the Baltics and in Poland. Hadn't really amounted to much. We're supposed to have missile defense. Hasn't really gotten off the ground. And we have not given, as you suggested, the Ukrainians defensive lethal weapons, and that's pretty sad too. So, it's not game, set, and match point for Putin, but he certainly has the early advantage.
So is the issue here, look, is anybody unclear about Putin's revanchism, that his posture for revanchism, and it's just a matter of political will then to confront him, as you say, to respond with strength, as that's the only thing that he respects?
That's my position. That's what I argue in Putin's master plan. And as you suggested before, neither Hillary nor Donald Trump, and certainly not Gary Johnson, have a plan, the ability, or the tools to confront Putin, who will do anything he can to destabilize our country, our elections, and frankly, our way of life.
And is part of the tools that are lacking, and it may be in addition to the imagination of the presidential candidates, a Europe that just doesn't have the desire to stand up and demonstrate strength either? And so how does, are you suggesting that America may need to go it alone? And if that's the case, then that's the case, if we're unable to arouse our European allies?
I'm posturing or presenting something else, that Europe is rallied by a revitalized United States. Mm-hmm. But so far, I don't see who's going to do that. I mean, I can't vote for Trump. I won't vote for Johnson. And Hillary has lots of problems, but she at least talks tough. Whether she would be a better president, time will tell.
All right. He is Doug Schoen, political analyst for Fox News. The book, Putin's Master Plan to Destroy Europe, Divide NATO, and Restore Russian Power and Global Influence. Doug, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.